Good afternoon. With the U.S. Vice President making a critical visit to Israel, Washington is intensifying efforts to manage the Gaza ceasefire and advance Trump's peace plan. The visit follows a series of Israeli airstrikes, the most severe escalation since the truce took effect, raising fears of renewed conflict. Meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has stressed that Washington is taking multiple steps to preserve the truce, stating the ceasefire is still in place. But deep division within Israel's government threatened the diplomatic path forward. Hotline ministers are pushing to intensify military operations, complicating Washington's delicate balance act. As J.D. Vance arrives in Israel amid escalating tensions, can America's diplomatic efforts hold the line? Welcome to In Depth. As Washington ramps up diplomacy to preserve peace, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance arrived in Israel today to meet with the country's leaders, joining Mid-East envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, who are already there monitoring the Gaza ceasefire. According to the New York Times, Trump administration officials are reportedly concerned that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu may abandon the U.S.-backed truce. Despite recent violence, both Israel and Hamas say they remain committed to the deal. In a speech to the Knesset on Monday, Netanyahu said he would discuss security challenges and diplomatic opportunities with Vance. Meanwhile, Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer, urging Israel not to take steps that could jeopardize the first phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan, according to the Times of Israel. Netanyahu and Dermer reaffirmed Israel's commitment to the agreement and called on Hamas to do the same. U.S. envoys also met with two major generals to assess Israel's readiness for the next phase of the plan. Discussions also focused on preparations to implement the agreement.
The United States is doubling down on diplomacy in the Middle East in an effort to cement the Gaza peace agreement. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance is visiting Israel, a move aimed at keeping a tense ceasefire intact and advancing President Trump's peace initiative. The visit comes just one day after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held high-level talks with U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to begin discussions on transitioning into the plan's second phase. The ceasefire appeared to have narrowly survived serious threats over the weekend, including intense Israeli airstrikes and mutual accusations of violations by both sides. Netanyahu declared on Monday that the Israeli military had dropped nearly 169 tons of bombs on Gaza over the weekend, marking the most intense escalation since the ceasefire began. However, both Israel and Hamas recommitted to the Trump peace framework on Monday. Trump, speaking from Washington, insisted the situation would be handled toughly but properly and maintained the ceasefire remains in effect.
It's going to be handled properly. It's going to be handled toughly but properly.
Is the ceasefire still in place?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
But internal divisions within Israel's government complicate matters. Far-right ministers like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich are pushing to continue military operations, potentially undermining the U.S.-led effort. As Vice President Vance lands in Tel Aviv, all eyes are on Washington's ability to hold the ceasefire together and keep its peace plan on track.
Well, for more analysis, we're joined from Lawa by Mr. Nouman Abu Isa, political analyst on U.S. affairs, and from Cairo, Mr. Mohammed Osman, international relations specialist. Good afternoon to you both. And let me here start by Mr. Nouman. And J.D. Vance is the highest-ranking U.S. official now on the ground in Israel. that is, of course, that he is joining Kushner and Witkoff, who are already there. Now, what does this high-level surge in diplomacy tell about the current state of the Gaza ceasefire?
Good day to all. Yes, it's the highest level of American diplomacy. The president himself visited Cairo and Israel not too long ago, and then now the vice president is visiting Israel. That tells that the Middle East is a top priority for this administration, and it's becoming the top priority for most of the world in that light as well. Because when the president went to Egypt, 20 other leaders from around the globe joined him to be witness on the agreement they signed in Sharm el-Sheikh not too long ago, and that is an indication that the American administration has given Israel enough war, because the president gave Israel about 9 months or 10 months to finish the job, and he gave them all the weapons they needed to finish the job militarily, and they failed to do so. So now the president is saying that we need to have a different approach, and that's why his team is dispatched to the Middle East to work with all the players, and especially, I guess, the surrounding countries who are very interested in advancing peace in Gaza. They are feeling the pressure and the heat from the casualties and the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza, and the American wants to have a new economic approach to solving this problem instead of the military one.
Yes, actually, we were speaking about the highest diplomatic existence sending J.D. Vance. We'll get back to you, Mr. Nauman, but let me here go to Mr. Osman. And Mr. Osman, reports indicated that Trump administration is concerned that Netanyahu may abandon the U.S.-backed deal. Now, what do you think of that threat, and what leverage beyond diplomatic pressure can the Trump administration put on Israel to ensure the compliance?
Thank you for having me, Mona. Greetings to you and to the honorable audience and your guests. Well, the United States has all the leverage it needs to impose whatever pressure on Israel so that they would comply with the agreement. The possibility of Netanyahu walking out of the agreement, of course, has been always present, and it was never denied. It comes as no surprise to anyone or to any decent or observant observer of the situation in Gaza and the Israeli and Palestinian conflict, and anyone who is aware of the nature of the Netanyahu government and the nature of the composition of his governing coalition. This man was forced into the ceasefire agreement and this peace plan by the Americans. If it's up to him and to his clique of right-wing fanatics, they would not abide for a single second to any of the provisions of this agreement. So I believe that the United States did demonstrate its ability to pressure Israel, first by forcing them to adhere to the terms of this agreement, largely at least, if not entirely. And also when violence sprung up in the Gaza Strip the day before yesterday, and the massive airstrikes Israel carried out, killing dozens of people, the United States managed to decisively intervene and rein in Netanyahu before he relaunched the war in full force once again. So this proves that the Americans do know very well how to pressure the Israelis and force down their hands and force them to compel them to comply with the agreement. So that's why what worries me, Mona, when U.S. officials leak to the media that they are worried about Netanyahu potentially withdrawing from the agreement, Netanyahu would never dare withdraw from the agreement unless the United States allows him to do so. So as long as the United States keeps up the pressure, this is never going to happen. The day this agreement fails, God forbid, and the war resumes, we should know very well, Mona, that this has happened with U.S. consent, or at least by U.S. negativity and reluctance to apply pressure on the Israelis. We should never be fooled by these narratives and talking points that are propagated by such American media outlets that wish to always give the impression that Netanyahu is a loose cannon. He's not. He cannot move without the consent and the permission and the support of the Americans. So if he undertakes any step to undermine this agreement, it means that the Americans have consented to his undermining of the agreement.
Right. There are also the domestic pressures We'll get back to you, Mr. Osman. Mr. Noman, an article from the Jerusalem Post suggests the latest ceasefire setbacks are putting the U.S. and Israel's friendship to a test. What do you think of that? And do you think Israel's ceasefire violations are putting the U.S. and Israel's friendship to a real test?
It's clearly that President Trump has changed course in the last couple of weeks, and he's now putting pressure on the administration in Israel to also change course and achieve a settlement to the issue without the continued bombardment and the killing of the children, because that led to the isolation of Israel in the United Nations and could lead also to the isolation of the United States in the world, because the majority of most of the world now is sympathizing with the Palestinians, and also most of the American public sympathize with the Palestinians as well. So there is a pressure on the American administration to bring this conflict to a close, and that's what the president wants. However, Netanyahu wants the continuation of the war, because that means the continuation of his rule as the premier in Israel, and he does not want this war to stop, because he has some pressure also from the right in his own government to continue the war. One of his ministers tweeted war. That's what he wants. War is what they want, and they want the continuation of this war.
Actually, two of his ministers, Ben Gvir and Smotrich, very well known. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and I mean, he's trying to also hold his government together. So he wants to continue the war, but he knows that the international community is not going to allow him. And now the administration thinks that they can initiate rebuilding and projects to subside this war and start with the rebuilding phase in the Middle East and get the attention of the war and of their blind support to the killing of children. And that is in a challenge, and that's what we are seeing today. All this maneuvering is trying to pressure the Israeli government to change course, and I don't know if they will be successful, because there is no real power other than United States power to stop this, and I don't think the United States wants to use any kind of a military power to stop this conflict. They want to use their economic muscles to see if they can use the opportunity of working with the surrounding countries with economic developments to bring this conflict to a stop, if not slow down.
But the question was, would it really put relations between the U.S. and Israel into a test? Let me go here to... Let me go to
the American government have been supportive of the Israeli government for decades, and we know that for a fact. The Israeli government have a strong AIPAC lobby in this government, and the government, usually the American government, comply with the Israeli. But now many of the lobbyists and the members of Congress, they think that Israel is hurting itself by continuing this war, and they need to change course.
Right. Let me go here to Mr. Osman, and let me reiterate the question in another way. Now, the U.S.-Israel relationship or relations has survived many crises, and we're speaking about, as described by many presidents, U.S. presidents, strong, solid, unbreakable. Now, if I may ask you, to which extent, or would you categorize the current political pressure or strain as a temporary disagreement over tactics, or does it signal a deeper, more fundamental divergence in their strategic goals for the Middle East? What do you think?
Mona, no one should ever bet on the Israeli-American alliance unraveling or being at a detrimental or existential risk. This is nonsense. This is never going to happen, because this partnership or this alliance is not a luxury for both sides. Without the United States, Israel will cease to exist within a few years, and I'm not exaggerating. Without the unlimited, unconditional support of the United States and how the United States treats it as part of its own territories, as part of its own country. The United States acts acts towards Israel as if it is the 51st state of the United States. So we have to reckon with this fact. And on the other hand, the Americans do understand that without Israel in the region and without a strong and reliable Israel in the region, U.S. supremacy and hegemony and even influence in the region will be completely non-existent, because the United States is not a natural ally of this region, and it has to secure its part of its interests at least, or back up its interest, and the entire process or the entire mechanism by which it safeguards its interest in the region has to be supported by some hard power, and this hard power is presented always by the solid military force of Israel, which acts as the United States henchman in this region for the past few decades. So we should not have any illusions, Mona, about this these tensions right now.
But Mr. Osman, do you think there can be some divergence in their strategic plans towards the Middle East, and that the goals are different?
Definitely, and this has happened before. We have seen this with the Madrid peace conference. And also, back then it was the Shamir government, a right-wing government, and Netanyahu was represented in the Israeli delegation, one of the representatives and one of the aides and close advisors of Prime Minister Shamir back then. And the United States basically dragged Israel by the hair to come and attend this conference and accept a peace process. Later on, a new Israeli government came along, led by Yitzhak Rabin, and they were way more committed to peace, and thus the Oslo Accords happened. And afterwards, of course, Rabin was assassinated, and Israel reverted to right-wing fanaticism with the rise of Netanyahu as prime minister, and since then he has been plaguing Israeli politics up to this day, since 1998. So this relationship always finds a way to work itself out, and there are no core differences between the Israelis and the Americans with regard to their vision or their strategy with regards to the Middle East. The United States maybe leans towards less coercive and less violent methods by which to achieve those objectives, but the objectives are the same. Israel, on the other hand, does lean towards the idea of using power in order to establish both Israeli and U.S. supremacy and hegemony in this region. But the United States is not interested in treating any other stakeholder fairly, and is completely biased to the Israeli side and to the interests of Israel. For God's sake, Mona, President Trump would not even commit to the two-state solution publicly, even with this, all of this talk about peace and the Sharm el-Sheikh conference, and him visiting the region, and him stopping the war in Gaza. Yet he says that he will never commit to the two-state solution, and he said that he will agree to whatever everyone agrees upon, as if we are on a playground in a kindergarten. So unfortunately, the United States is not really committed to establishing peace in this region, but it seems that they are committed at this point to restore calm to the region and to preserve the cessation of hostilities in Gaza, because now this war is creating a burden on the United States. But that does not mean that the United States opposes Israel's grand plans in any way. It rather postpones them a bit, or maybe is re-engineering the methods by which Israel will apply its designs on this region. We should never be fooled by anything else.
So we're speaking here about difference in interests. Mr. Noman, as Washington wraps up diplomacy around Gaza ceasefire, what tools does Washington have to defuse the situation and push Trump's plan forward?
If I can respond briefly first, that the environment in the Middle East has changed completely in the last 2 years, and Iran, for example, and Hezbollah have been a big factor in the past, and they've been marginalized, and the threat to the United States interest is no more in the Middle East, and the United States is pursuing what they call the Abraham Accord. They want more Arab countries to normalize with Israel, and they cannot cannot normalize with Israel as long as Israel continuing this war. So they are trying to put a stop to this war, and they are using their economic muscles. They send Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the president, who has been active and effective in the Abraham Accord in the last previous period for President Trump presidency, and he was able to bring many countries to have normalization with Israel, and now he's trying another push, and he wants to bring economic development and reconciliation between Israel and its neighbors, and that is the diplomatic muscles the United States is using today to try to convince the public that there are real challenges out there, and there are real needs also for the humanitarian needs in Gaza, and there are lots of resources available to address those humanitarian needs from the region. The United States does not want to spend more money, but they want to spend more diplomatic muscles in this area. And the president is also being challenged elsewhere in the globe, especially in East Asia and China. So he's trying to have a success in the Middle East after his failure in Ukraine and also in challenging China.
Right, Mr. Osman, far-right ministers like Ben Gvir and Smotrich are demanding or are calling actually for the war to continue. To what extent does the domestic political pressure or divide in Israel handcuff Netanyahu's ability to negotiate with the U.S. delegation or with the other partners the next stages of the ceasefire?
It will definitely present a significant challenge. The right-wing members, the ultra-right-wing members of the Israeli government, Ben Gvir, Smotrich, and their parties, and the other minor parties that joined this coalition from the religious nationalist far right, they are not happy with the arrangements imposed by the Trump plan. However, at the same time, it seems that they have received guarantees in order not to basically disband the Israeli government or cause the collapse of the Israeli government. They haven't withdrawn so far like they did, for example, like Ben Gvir at least did in January when the ceasefire was reached, the 60-day ceasefire. Now we're not seeing a similar trend because basically Israel still maintains its occupation of about more than half of the Gaza Strip, and it doesn't seem that Israel is really willing to engage positively with the current peace initiative as long as the United States does not apply pressure. The U.S. applies pressure, so that's why Israel acts accordingly. But whenever they get a chance to evade their obligations and their responsibilities under the agreement and attempt to sabotage it, they go ahead and take that chance without hesitation. So I believe that that so far Netanyahu's government is not threatened with collapse. It seems that he has given them guarantees that this war, in his view and in Israel's view, has not ended yet. At least they do believe that they can achieve their zero-sum equation of forcefully or at least forcefully or forcing Hamas to disarm rather, and even maintaining some sort of military presence in a buffer zone inside the Gaza Strip. So under these terms, the ultra-right-wing members of the government are willing to stay in the government. And if you look at the Trump plan, Mona, in its very raw, unedited version, it says that Hamas must completely disarm, relinquish power, and also Israel will be able to maintain a buffer zone, including the Muraj axis, and about a buffer zone 1 kilometer deep into the Gaza Strip for years to come. So it seems that these provisions do satisfy the right wing. Of course, these provisions have the Arab stakeholders, especially Egypt and Qatar and Turkey and the other mediators, have profound reservations on these provisions, and the Americans have hinted that they might be willing to renegotiate them in the second phase of negotiations, where all the sticking points are. So the thing is, Mona, that we have a very shaky agreement. It has sheer potential. It might actually succeed, but it will require the U.S. to be way more flexible in their negotiations and way more assertive also in how they pressure the Israelis. And just my final comment, and my colleague, I don't know whether he was commenting on what I said earlier, but there is completely no contradiction between what I said and what he said. The United States is eager to impose a sham peace on this region based on the so-called normalization treaties and the peace treaties. We have to remember what President al-Sisi said, Mona, that normalization with certain Arab countries will not buy this region peace without actually accepting and implementing the two-state solution. There is no other choice but the implementation of the two-state solution. Any attempts to subvert inalienable Palestinian rights that are preserved and safeguarded by international law and by the consensus of the international community will not buy this region any sort of stability. And we have to understand this, Mona. These alternatives and these other frameworks that are being proposed, sham frameworks, I would repeat, proposed by the U.S. president and others, and many of those Zionist members of the U.S. administration, as well as Israel, of course, itself, these alternatives to the two-state solution are completely unacceptable and will ensure and will guarantee no peace in the region. If this Palestinian cause or this Palestinian issue is not treated based on the principles of justice from their deep roots by realizing the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and the right to establish their independent states on the borders of 1967, peace will never be realized. And I think Egypt has repeatedly, and many other Arab countries, and even the Europeans now, and the Russians, and the Chinese, and the whole world is reiterating this fact. And even the Arab countries that they are mentioning, a country like Saudi Arabia, it said that it will not normalize with Israel unless Israel restores the path to the three-state solution and accepts it once again, because now Netanyahu flatly rejects this two-state solution, which is stipulated by international law and by the United Nations. The founding resolution of Israel in 1947 stipulates that there is to be a Palestinian state and an Israeli state.
Yes.
So if Israel has a right to exist, then Palestine has a right to exist, Mona.
Right. Right, Mr. Newman, Nauman, the central,
can I respond?
the main concern. Yes, definitely. You want to comment here?
Yeah, I just want to say that Israel did not say that they want a two-state solution, and Netanyahu is adamant against the two-state solution. And also, President Trump is not saying at this point that he wants two-state solution.
But this is exactly what Mr. Osman here said. Indeed.
Well, I mean, the state solutions, I guess, is not finalized. What is going on now? There is a pressure to end the genocide and the ethnic cleansing, and that's what we are seeing. That is a positive move forward, but it's not enough. I agree with my colleague that the normalization requires a two-state solution. However, the United States wants economic pressure and economic development to bring this genocide to an end. The genocide has impacted the international community, and many countries now are siding and wanting to be involved in the resolution of this conflict, and they are offering tools and being participants in this solution in addition to the U.S. And that is putting pressure on the United States to move forward in solving this problem.
But Yes, the main concern now, Mr. Nauman, is that Netanyahu might abandon Trump's plan given the political climate inside Israel or within. Now, what specific concession or I'm not speaking about concession because this should be an action, would the U.S. delegation most likely press Netanyahu or do to press Netanyahu to commit to this ceasefire right now?
Yeah, this ceasefire did not come only between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It came through the participation of the United States, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, in addition to many European leaders who are participants and trying to be active in getting this genocide to an end, and also bringing a two-state solution in the future. However, now Israel, with the current government, is not able to do that because the current government will collapse if they are saying openly that they want two-state solution. So the United States understands that, and even the president of the United States asked the president of Israel to give Prime Minister a furlough, basically, to allow him to not worry about the courts after this war stops. And that's what I guess, I mean, the United States is trying to do. They are trying to keep the Israeli government in place, however, push with all its might with its partners to bring relief to the people in Gaza, and also bring relief to the people in the West Bank as well, in addition to the whole area as a whole. So they are working with multiple fronts here. They are working with Lebanon, Syria, and other countries in the area, in addition to the other participants in this peace agreement. So the United States is trying to bring a different narrative to this problem, because they used the military force. They used it for 2 years and they failed. And things did not change. They tried to decimate and eliminate Hamas, and Hamas is still the one who released the 20 hostages with the pressure of the participants, and they are still negotiating on the table and do exist under the ground and above the ground in Gaza.
Right, and definitely remains to be seen, but if war continued, then stability would not prevail, and if stability would not prevail, there will be no chances for collaboration or for normalization. That was Mr. Nauman Abu Isa, political analyst on U.S. affairs, and Mr. Mohammed Osman, international relations specialist. We thank you both, gentlemen, for your very valuable insights. And I guess that brings us to the end of today's episode of In Depth. Many thanks for joining us, and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.